Fair Count's Undercounted, Young, Black, and Fed Up. We're here to help bring awareness to the importance of the 2020 census, especially for young people who are estimated to be the largest population that is undercounted. The Undercounted Young, Black, and Fed Up series is a part of a larger See Me, Hear Me campaign here at Fair Count. See me in the 2020 census and hear me at the polls in November. So today's episode is a nod to our founder, Stacey Abrams' Get It Done. The census is an important pathway to civic engagement, and we want to talk about some of the other ways that young people can continue to contribute to our democracy. So I'm excited for our conversation today. Today, we're talking about the ways that young people can change our community. Young people are not just the future, but they are the right now. We'd like to make clear first that Fair Count is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and as such, we do not advocate for the defeat, election, or re-election of any person or any political candidate. Now, let's pass it over to our esteemed guests who you see joining us now. Let me introduce. This episode, we have Mayor of Birmingham, Randall Woodfin. We have Georgia Senator Nikema Williams, Virginia Delegate Marcia Price, Mississippi Representative Latasha Jackson, and Louisiana Representative Ted James. So we have quite a panel here for you today. And I can't forget that we also have Ed Reed, who is with Fair Count and heads up many of the initiatives, including this webinar today. So Ed will join us in on the conversation as well. So let's get right to the very first question. Some of the most historic leaders of movements that changed the narrative of this country have been young people, especially amongst African Americans. Let's think about Dr. King, who led the civil rights movement in his 30s, and young people across this country that led Black Lives Matters, marched against gun violence, and fought to end climate change. But there's a prevailing narrative that young people are not interested at all in civic engagement. We know that that isn't the case, but there is a lot of work to be done. So today, Fair Count is thrilled to be a part of doing this work. Let's start with the mayor. You were elected as the youngest mayor in Birmingham history in 120 years. Did you encounter people who said you were too young or you shouldn't run for office? And what was your response to that?
Hey, first, thanks for having me on, and I'm glad to be among some rock stars who I see here in the corner of my screen, who I look up to in other states and cities across America. So thank you all for the work you're doing. To answer your question, the answer is yes. I ran into a sea of people who said I was too young, it wasn't my time, I wasn't ready. But I think it was important for me to do more listening than talking. And so I just asked them to expound on that question, and that put me in a position not only to answer honest and candidly of why I thought it was an opportunity for me to serve, but how age isn't necessarily a factor in leading, not just in a city, but age is not a factor in leading a church. Age is not a factor in leading a nonprofit. Age is not a factor in being a representative at the state house, or age is not a factor in being in Congress. What's important is, I think, having a vision, having a willingness to serve, having a passion, and understanding that you can learn not only from older people, but you can also learn from younger people. And so part of that was my response. And then to add on to that, it was pretty simple. I think age-wise, you have to do more talking with your feet and actually get out here and hustle and grind and knock on doors and talk to people and communicate why you want to serve them. And I think that did more for countering, I'm too young, it's not my time, I'm not ready. And so I think even with what this organization is doing around getting out the importance of the count as it relates to the census, it's really important that we communicate with young people. You don't have the luxury to stand on the sidelines. You don't have the luxury to not participate in the census. It's really important that you engage this process because we all matter, and the count is extremely important.
Mayor, thank you. How do you think your age has been both a challenge and an asset to your vision as mayor?
I'll go with the asset first. I think the age as an asset has allowed me to not come in with any preconceived notions about how government should be run. If anything, It's allowed me to think outside of the box. It's allowed me to be creative. It's allowed me to not be risk adverse, right? I think a lot of government in itself can be inherently risk adverse and conservative, meaning people are not willing to try new things because they may fail. I'm not afraid to tell you in the 2.5 years I've been in office as mayor of the city of Birmingham, there have been some things we've attempted to do. We jumped off the porch and haven't been afraid and we failed, but you get back up and you try it again. You try it a different way. And so I think that part of being young or younger has been an asset. I would say a challenge has been you don't know everything, right? And so the way I overcame that challenge is I put people around me who were smarter. I put a lot of people around me who knew how to execute. I put people around me who've been around the block before. And all of that combined allowed me to overcome that challenge of being young or younger.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing that. I'd like to go to Representative Jackson and say that this series has focused on the census and voting thus far. And today we're focusing on the tagline that our Fair Count founder always uses, which is "Get it done." We want to know how young elected people are leading. In your district in Mississippi, tell us how young people are engaging in the census and voting.
Well, thank you again for extending this platform. I want to thank Leader Abram and our wonderful team for allowing us this platform to discuss what's going on within the Southeastern region and to talk directly of what's going on in Mississippi. I have to say that the young elected officials in Mississippi, my colleagues, are very active and making sure that individuals are engaged in the civic process and to speak directly to District 11, in which the district I serve. I must say that the energy that young individuals, young adults, young professionals bring to the community is really vital for the success of the census, for voting, for all aspects of community development. And for us, we don't try to use young adults only when they're necessary and beneficial. And I think that's key. A lot of times we engage youth or young adults when it's voter registration or when it's something applicable to get the millennials out and focused on an initiative that's beneficial to the establishment. And that's really not a way to engage them so that they could see their true value and their true worth with the legislative process, with the democracy within our nation. And so I must say that we have several individuals that are bringing innovation, creativity, not just on social media platforms, but young individuals that are true influencers that can influence individuals that maybe I'm not able to influence, to get active and to get it done. So, like individuals from other areas, I don't think the concept is any different from District 11, but it's making sure that our young adults are engaged in whatever aspect of influence that they have. And so within District 11, I try my best as the state legislature for the district to ensure that they're involved in the process throughout the term, the legislative term, throughout the year, and not just at a time when census or voting is vital to the community.
That's so important to make young people feel like their voices are heard all the time and not just when one specific thing is happening and they know we need their vote or we need their participation, but we need their participation all the time. So that's really important. I thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about how we get this work done through a pandemic. As COVID-19 shifts our organizing techniques away from rallies and marches to keep one another safe, what are some of the ways that we can come together, organize, protest, petition, and otherwise demand change? We've been exploring that. For example, we've all been collectively grieving and raging over the murder of Ahmaud Arbery in Brunswick, Georgia. People of all ages are angry and scared and quite literally fed up as usual. And we're trying to figure out what can we do to organize during this time. Delegate Price, you push for change from the floor of the House in Virginia, but we know change doesn't necessarily start there. What are some of the ways that people in your community make their voice heard and how are young people connecting with one another while sheltering from home?
Yeah, absolutely. And as the others have said, thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation. Anytime I get to be associated with anything young, it makes me feel good. So talking about how the young folks are working, that's it's cool. And I think, you know, I come to this as a community organizer that happens to be elected. So one of the main things that I see as far as my job is to intentionally create the spaces for those young people's voices to be heard. And so while I can't do like a teen summer camp, or I can't do some of the mixers that I've done typically in the same way, we are utilizing the same technology that they may be using for school. And you know, shout out to the organizers that are finding Zoom as their method of protest. So you had the Virginia Student Power Network, who at University of Virginia organized a protest to make sure that all of the workers at University of Virginia were treated fairly and compensated fairly during this pandemic. And they got that done by Zoom when they were spread all over the nation, having been sent home. So I think, you know, this younger generation has this fire that COVID-19 can't put out. And they're gonna find the ways to connect, they're gonna find the ways to organize. And I think just as electeds, it's up to us in order to help guide that process, because there's a lot of rage and a lot of disappointment and sadness and fear. And I'm like, all right, cool, but what are we doing? And what are we doing collectively in order to make sure that we can stop this? And so we may not be able to do the traditional ways, but we still have to make sure that our voices are heard. We can't shelter at home and be silent, especially when so much is disproportionately hitting our communities, from the police brutality, from the effects of COVID, from the economic injustices, from the federal stimuluses. All of this is hitting our community, and it's all also tied to the census. So let's have those conversations. And so I think the folks in my area are just like, all right, when's the next conversation? And so we've been having those through Zoom or other webinar platforms.
Well, thank you so much. If everybody's as excited as you are, then we have a lot of hope for the future. I want to go to Senator Nikema Williams. First, I want to say that I'm so glad that you are healthy after being diagnosed with the coronavirus, and thank you for your service. You should not have to risk the health of your family in order to represent your constituents for our democracy, but you did anyway, and we thank you for that. Traditionally, community activism has meant large gatherings to show unity and power. In fact, in 2018, you yourself were arrested for protesting voter suppression here in Georgia at your own office, the Capitol building. You're also a mom to a little boy, and as we are watching the country respond to the killing of Ahmaud Arbery in the midst of a global pandemic and social distancing, how do you think our country's response to COVID-19 will change our notion of activism?
So thank you for this question, Mo. Thank you for convening this panel, Fair Fight. This is a critically important conversation to be having right now. This morning, a lot of my colleagues in the Legislative Black Caucus got up and they drove from Atlanta 4.5 hours to Brunswick, Georgia to attend a press conference to speak out on behalf of the tragedy that happened to Ahmaud. And I didn't go down because, number one, I am pushing back against our governor about how we move forward in a very thoughtful way to open back up our state. And I wanted to make sure that I was leading by example and staying home, especially since I'm still a little iffy about getting back out there after having been like down for a full 3+ weeks suffering from COVID-19. But one of the things that I have seen in response to the murder of Ahmaud down in Brunswick is people are still showing up and willing to risk their lives to get out there and fight for injustices in our communities. And so what I'm encouraging people to do is make sure that you're wearing your mask when you go out, to make sure that we're staying safe and doing some digital campaigns. So I'm working with a group of moms here where we are doing a digital campaign to, when we go back into the legislative session in June here in Georgia, we not only have to push to pass a hate crimes law, because Georgia is one of only 4 states in the country without a hate crimes law, but that doesn't go far enough. And so we're looking at how do we look down the road and make sure that we are organizing online. We know that there's a Black Twitter exists for a reason, because we can mobilize our people like we never have had an opportunity before. And we need to push back on making sure that our citizen arrest laws here in Georgia are changed and updated so that just the look of the color of our skin is not a reason for people to be fearful and take our lives. And we're doing all of that online right now. I've been working with other legislators, not just here in Georgia, but across the country on what laws look like in their state so that we can implement those. And we're bringing people into the conversation. Our NAACP president here in Georgia is only 25 years old. And he is organizing. I've been on the phone with him all morning trying to make sure that we're, number one, conveying the wishes of Ahmaud's parents and the way that we're organizing, but number two, bringing other people into the fold, because it's not just the leaders who have a voice in this fight and in this struggle. And we know that it's going to take all of us to get to the other side of this. So we are making sure that we're using our text platforms. I have more group text than I'd like to admit right now on how we're pulling people together, because different people are reacting in different types of ways. So for some people, they're gonna find solace in coming together and watching the Zoom meeting today to figure out different ways to connect, but other people is specifically through text, and other people it is retweeting and it is sharing things that we're posting on our social media platforms. But we need all of our voices in this conversation, but we have to stay healthy while doing so, because what I went through with that virus is brutal, and I'm sure that Representative James will share some of that later, but we have to stay healthy while activating our bases, because in Georgia, 80% of the hospitalizations from COVID-19 have been Black people. So we have to make sure that first and foremost, we're keeping our people safe.
Thank you so much for that. I know people would want me to just stop and ask you where they can go to keep up with the latest on what is happening with the activism around Ahmaud's murder. And so if there's just a couple of social media handles that you can give so that they could keep abreast of that, that would be great.
The Georgia NAACP is a great resource. They are in constant communication with Ahmaud's family, so we know that we're not doing anything against the wishes of the family, but following the Georgia NAACP. And I have a big mouth on and off of social media, so following at Nikema Williams on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, I will be sure that I'm conveying timely information on all platforms.
That's wonderful. And the handle for the Georgia NAACP is @Georgia_NAACP for anybody who wants to follow that, and we hope that you will. Let's go next. I want to get a question into Representative Ted James. One of the hardest things about civic participation is that you need everyone to respond to fix it. It can be a catch-22. People don't respond because they don't feel that the government has necessarily been there for them. Yet the only solution is to double down and actually participate to make a change. This can be especially true for young people who are not historically regular voters and are normally undercounted in the census. You two have recently recovered from COVID-19, and we are so thankful for your recovery and that you could be here with us today to share your experience and insight. Obviously, that experience impacts the way you deal with the virus as a legislator and as a leader in your community. How has that experience changed the way you look at relief and recovery from the pandemic? And do you think young people will see participating in the census and in voting in November in a new light given our new normal?
Yeah, I want to echo all of the previous speakers and thanking you for not just the invitation, but for providing this platform. And as I look at Senator Williams, it's so good to see you looking extremely healthy and back to the energy, because I was a fan before I actually met you, following your arrest and all those good things. And it's good to see young people like yourself taking the me out of it and elevating the issues. But for me, as I sat in the hospital, I was thinking about the fact that had I not been Representative James, I would not have been tested. That's the first issue, right? A 38-year-old Black man with no health conditions, not in the at-risk pool. There are so many people in my city, in my district, that were told no when they had a fever, right? They were told no when they continued to cough. Had I not been Representative James, I probably would not have been tested on that Monday. So my experience has, number one, elevated my concern with making sure that we are not discriminating in the number of tests. We're not discriminating where those tests are deployed, because of people talk a lot about the issues in New Orleans, but there's a parish right next to Orleans Parish, Jefferson Parish, that's predominantly white. when we saw the numbers elevating in both Orleans and Jefferson, most of the resources would apply to Jefferson first and then Orleans second. And as we, Senator Williams, my colleagues are in session right now. I've not going back to the Capitol. Right now we're still under a stay-at-home order. Several members of the Black Caucus have decided not to participate. I'm a chair of a committee, so still trying to make sure that my constituents are represented, but not putting myself in a position to, go in the Capitol where we're not doing social distancing. But I have been trying to talk to young people. Just last week, several of my constituents, paid sick leave. That's an issue, right? A bill failed last week in the Capitol because my colleagues who are so pushing to get the economy back rolling for their business owner friends, they don't give a damn about those workers that are standing those businesses up. So a bill to provide paid sick leave failed. Louisiana has the lowest unemployment weekly benefit in the country. A bill to increase that benefit just on last week in that same meeting failed. So as young people are calling me, those young people that work in those restaurants, those young people that are in New Orleans, that are in the entertainment industry, I'm speaking to them on those issues, and they want to know why. And the answer to why is because there aren't enough people elevating your issues. And we need to do a better job of responding to the census, because here we have a very low response rate, under 50%. The more and more we respond, we're not even talking about the millions of dollars that are going to come, but I'm talking to them about representative democracy. So when we respond, we have more people at the Capitol that are going to vote with our interests. So have been trying to use this pandemic and always bringing it back to representative democracy, and also looking at one of the drive-through testing sites in the urban areas. People couldn't get to it because there was a problem with a bridge that was out and it's been out for maintenance. So reminding them again, respond to the census, because those are dollars that are going to come down to our community to improve our infrastructure. So for us, the challenge is, as leaders, we have to find a way to make the census real, to make it one that is not just something that's coming from the same government that we don't trust, right? And we know that there are so many misconceptions out there that prevent folks, like you said in your question, so many people don't trust government. So the same institution that we don't trust, the same institution that won't approve us for SBA loans because our credit score is too low, the same institution that didn't allow for our small businesses to take advantage of all of these dollars that are coming. Now that same institution, you're gonna ask me to give out all my personal information. So we have to continue to make it real for them and put it where they live.
You talked about SBA loans through the government and all these other resources, but what else should we be doing to ensure our younger generations are not decimated by the pandemic and its after effects?
We have to continue to be loud, be vocal on these issues. I have my Southern University hat on, and what we've done, we are bringing a lot of these issues straight to the campuses. They are continuing to have, just like we're having these Zoom conference calls, they're having them as well. And we're talking about all of these issues. Here in Louisiana, we have 3 interns at the Urban League of Louisiana working with our HBCUs. So we're continuing to funnel information there. And then sometimes, I walk in the room and our young people don't want to hear from Representative James, but they'll hear from the DJ that works at 94.1 that they know and they love. They'll hear from Langston Galloway, who's a basketball player for the Pistons. So a lot of times you have to make sure that we're focusing on the messenger and not just the message, and putting it right where they live. My party promoters here in Baton Rouge, they can't throw parties, so their flyers now are reminding folks about different information, where to go and apply for COVID relief, and also reminding folks about the issues regarding the census. So we are taking the message and putting the message in those hands that those young people trust.
That is so important. I'd like to follow up with Senator Williams with that question. What are you doing to make sure in Georgia that, the youth, the younger generations are not decimated by everything that's going on in Georgia?
I think the biggest thing right now is we have to lead by example. Like, people are thirsty for authentic leadership. We saw that coming out of the numbers in young people showing up to vote in 2018 and raising their voices, and that has continued. And so making sure that when we go back into session, that we're not in these closed door meetings that block off access and people don't have a way to engage. And as we've ramped up this digital style of communications, we can't get rid of this once we go back to in-person meetings. And so making sure that we keep government accessible and showing people how government reflects in them. And representation matters, y'all. So it is critically important that we in the communities who look like the communities that we serve, that we're bringing more people into the fold. And so I am committed to making sure that I have another town hall right after this, where we're like ramping up our vote by mail program and teaching people how to actually get their ballots turned in. And then later this evening at 6, I have another town hall where we're talking about how people can actually like get local resources from the COVID-19 pandemic. So making sure that we are giving people access to their government, even at times when they can't actually show up in person. This has been a blessing and a curse, because now we've shown that we can make government more accessible to people, and you don't actually have to be in the physical building to get the information that you need. And so I'm going to push to make sure that we continue this even after this pandemic is over.
That's excellent. Thank you. We're going to go back to the mayor. We know people ages 18 to 29 of all races are one of the least likely to show up and vote and are at risk for being undercounted. How do we keep young people engaged in our democracy, especially since it is their democracy as well? Now, your administration has a partnership with nonprofits in your city to encourage conflict resolution among youth in Birmingham. What results have you seen directly from engaging young people on these issues that matter to them where they are?
I think that working backwards on your question, young people want to be engaged. They want a platform to share how they feel, what they think, and what they think government should be doing, what they think community should be doing, and how we should be engaging them. What I found with the different and various organizations that engage in conflict resolution, and these young people are showing up, we're having opportunities to sit in a circle and listen to them. They are as passionate about the community as any other age group, any other generation that exists here. And what I found from that is this: young people, what we got to do, and when I say we, the adults in the room, and not just in government, but in various spaces, we got to give young people not only a platform, but we have to communicate with them in the communication channel they like to receive information in. And so they're not necessarily sitting at home watching MSNBC. They're not necessarily listening to NPR, but as Representative James said, there are various ways you can communicate with young people, and their emissaries, their ambassadors that they'll listen to through transfer credibility and the platform they like to receive information in. And so as it relates to November, as it relates to the census, I think it's important to reach them in the channels that they engage in, and be our authentic selves too. I heard Ms. Williams, Senator Williams, say that, you know, people are starving for authentic leadership. That is extremely true. And I think young people want to make sure that if they're listening to somebody, that person is not just being open and candid, but they're being their true selves. And I think as it relates to whatever we want to see in November, as it relates to increased turnout of young people, what we want to see as it relates to the census and people participating in it, we have to communicate with them in the channel they receive information in, and we have to be real with them and tell them why this is important.
And just tell us a little bit about your conflict resolution program that you have put together.
Yeah, well, so it's what we found is I declared gun violence in the city of Birmingham as a public health crisis. It was the first thing I did probably about a year and a half ago. And in declaring gun violence a public health crisis, what I realized is that you're not going to police your way out of decreasing crime or decreasing gun violence in your city. You have to deal in these other two lanes. And so in addition to enforcement, there's another lane of reentry, and then there's another lane of prevention. I wanted to spend a lot of resources in the toolbox of prevention. Prevention centered around how do we engage young people before they make these decisions that are harmful to them or harmful to someone else or harmful to the community. In addition to that, how do we make sure if a young person has issues that they know opportunity exists where they can actually receive help. And so what we wanted to do with City Resources is partner with multiple nonprofits. So it's not just one nonprofit. We partner with multiple nonprofit organizations in the community. We've been doing this for a little bit, right at a year now, where we give additional resources to these nonprofits where they have the resources they need to engage young people in our community who may be having issues either at home, having issues at school, having issues in the community. And it gives them an on-ramp or off-ramp, if you will, to engage, share their issues, and then we teach conflict resolution too. So for example, probably about a week and a half ago, there were two young men in a car, both 17 years of age. A car pulled up on them, opened up fire on them. Luckily, both of them lived, but both were shot. We found out through some additional information and detail, it's, quote, gang related. And so people on my team have been in the position to reach out, assist both sides, have a mediator, and try to squash the beef. So there's no, and that is all for a couple reasons. The main reason is to save lives, right? We don't want these young people killing each other. Two is to make sure that we can create a space, a safe space where people can actually squash the beef. And so for those reasons, we believe this has been impactful. We believe it's been positive. And young people need to know there are other ways to solve their conflict without actually picking up a gun.
That's a perfect example of talking about meeting youth right where they are, identifying the problem and then finding a solution built around them in order for them to be able to participate in that. And so that's a great example. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'd like to go to Delegate Price next. You established a Zoom Youth Roundtable recently with the youth of your district. What have you learned in those conversations that must be very interesting about their interest in civic engagement?
Yeah, so we've had a couple of meetings. After the first one, I thought it was just going to be a one-time thing, and they were like, okay, when's the next one? But it has been very eye-opening for me because I know, we're making lots of decisions about their lives, and it's been quite a while since I've been in a high school chair sitting at a desk, but just to hear of their experience, and I think, you said they feel ignored, well, it's because they have been, and so I can tell at the level of gratitude that they have for my just having a Zoom meeting for them. Like the base level of listening, there's this immense gratitude and they light up. And that's how I know that they've been starved for it. But the other thing that I really find is that they are, speaking of get it done, they are a get it done generation. I think what my generation and our generation can help with is just the guidance. They're not getting a lot of the things within their curriculum that we may have gotten when I ask questions about the census. I mean, there is not a lot of real understanding about how important the census is, period, right? So just explaining to them like, okay, in their terms, like, Representative James said, in their terms, this is how it impacts your life. Okay, now go make sure your parents have counted you in their census. So if we just teach them how to do things, for instance, on the last meeting, last couple of meetings, there were some 17-year-olds and they were telling us about how they were left out completely from the CARES Act. There was no $500 for their family. They didn't get the $1,200. If you were 17 years old, you were left completely out of the stimulus. And I don't have a 17-year-old. I don't have kids. So I didn't know that as a lived experience until I talked to them about it. The other thing is in Newport News, we have like assignment-based distance learning as opposed to actual class time. And so when employers locally were finding about that, they were making the high schoolers work full time during the pandemic because the older folks were like, no, we're not coming out. And I'm just like, well, that's not cool. You guys got to finish your school. So all of these things that we're finding out that they were walking around and carrying without letting us know it was happening. So what I feel like I've done is created this space where they're like, oh no, this doesn't feel right. I'm gonna go tell Delegate Price, and them being able to do that. But then also me taking that information and working with my federal delegation. How can we fix this in the upcoming bills that you guys will be churning out, and how can we fix it on the state level, but them being able to honestly and authentically share their lived experiences informs better laws. And I think that that has been a benefit of having these conversations, and we're going to continue to keep talking.
And so when the pandemic is over, will you continue that kind of engagement, even when there will be opportunities to, I think to myself that even though there'll be opportunities to get together personally, I still feel like some of these Zoom things allow more people in and makes it much easier. I just think about being a working mom and how much easier it is to be able to log on while you can watch the oven and watch the dinner being made and participate. So will you keep that going even when we are back to contact?
So I'm totally not trying to sound like a hipster, but this is not new for me. This has been a way that I've had to do it for that very reason. I would put money down on getting like these big rooms, and it would be like 12 of us sitting there looking at each other. But as soon as I started having online, I think we were using our GoToMeeting before we switched to Zoom, but we've been doing this for that very reason, for childcare, for lack of a transportation. So so this is, I mean, I'm going into my fourth year kind of doing this sort of thing. But I think it has gained traction now that, it's an expectation that Zoom is part of life. So that's been cool. But of course, wherever I can find people is where I'll be. And if they're on Zoom, that's me. That's where I am. If they need WhatsApp, like I'm trying to keep up with all of these things that the kids are using. I will not do TikTok. I'm on it, but y'all will not see me doing dance challenges. But wherever they are, if they can message me so they can get the information to me, then I'm there.
That's wonderful. I think we all feel that way, that this will be a continuation of, engagement. It's sort of like a new, better way we're going to engage with each other. We know that the earlier you get people engaged in their behavior of civic engagement, the longer and more likely they will to participate, like voting, the more likely they are to make it a lifelong commitment. It is imperative that we engage young people now, like we've been saying, so that we're not dealing with the same voter disengagement later on. I want to go to Representative Ted James again. You are co-chair of the Millennial Action Project in Louisiana. How do you use this platform to engage young people about particularly the importance of voting?
Well, several things that we do. Number one, we have to make sure that we are doing our part, because as young folks, we get all excited around the moment, but we're not committed to the actual movement. So what we've done is we've asked the Secretary of State and our registrar of voters to bring voting machines for any election in our schools, be it you want to change the mascot, be it who's going to be the homecoming king and queen, your class representatives. So they're getting used to actually going, submitting, putting the card in the machine and pressing the button. So we're making it very real to them. The second thing that we're doing, and it calls for a total commitment, we're showing up when the cameras are not there. So I'm always like, I'll go work the concession stand in my district, right? I'll show up on just a senior day and just no shirt and tie, just being present. And like Mayor Wolfton said, that transferred credibility. So now I know that they're seeing me as just Ted, who happens to be a state rep who can go and do all these vastly important things. And then one of the other things we've done through the Urban League of Louisiana here, we've gone to our school boards and we have an MOU, so we could go in, and if you're 17 and you'll be 18 by election day, you can register to vote. So we're registering all those 17-year-olds, we're registering all those 18-year-olds, but we're not stopping there. We do a really good job in our community about registering people to vote, but then we forget about the voter education piece. So then we go back and talk to them about certain issues, and during early voting, we get buses and we have competitions. Last year during our governor's race, it was very important for us to reelect. Here in Louisiana, we almost have 2/3 majority Republican legislature, but we have a Democratic governor, largely because of the efforts through the Urban League to get out there and make sure that those young people were registered and informed. And then what we got out there and did is we made sure that we provided transportation to and from the polls during early voting. So like Delegate said, those TikTok challenges, those schools were having competitions. Who can get the most likes on their video? Then we're going to come back to your school and do a pizza party, right? Who can get the best video, get that video to blow up? We're going to come back to your school. So we found a way to incentivize them as well.
That's so important. And those are all great young and exciting, innovative ways to get folks to the polls, and that is so important. I want to go to Representative Jackson. You've been an advocate for children throughout your tenure in the legislature. What would you say to the next generation that is soon to start taking part in the democratic process? What words of wisdom would you give to young people who are looking to get involved, but they're kind of like, skeptical about government being an avenue for change in their lives?
Exactly. I would definitely encourage them to really look at the individuals within their communities, and if not within their communities, on a national level, that have gotten engaged in the results that they were able to yield. For example, Ashawn Johnson from Chicago, at the age of 8, spoke out about the school closure and received national attention because of an issue that was important to him and several other students. So it's not if now, and it's not a question if it's you, because I had to ask myself the same question. If not you, then who? If not now, then when? Because it's so important that you not count yourself out because of your age, because of individuals that create those barriers. The theme of this segment, Get It Done, as you was able to hear from the various panelists from this Zoom, we get it done. We're a generation that get it done. We find the innovation or the innovative ways to make it happen. And people are looking for results, and they're able to believe in people that can bring results. So to hear about the various initiatives and platforms that individuals are expanding to include young people, it's very encouraging. But at the same time, yet I'll become old and need to be replaced as well. So the preparation that you're receiving on the Zoom platforms, where you're able to share your issues or share your concerns and your passion about the change that you believe in and the change that you want to see in your prospective areas, and then obtaining a way to be able to have some outreach or an outlet to do some projects or some initiatives within your community makes the difference, so that when the necessary time comes, you're ready to take on the action as a leader. When I was elected into the House, I was 29 years old, but prior to, I moved from Chicago back to Mississippi and started an after-school and summer enrichment programs for youth within the community because I wanted to see those programs in the community, not knowing that my predecessor was going to die in office, but my predecessor died in office. And I had training ground prior to him dying that made me ready when the opportunity came. So I would like to encourage any youth or any young adults that are considering political leadership or a platform to be able to make effective change in government. Don't sit on the sideline waiting for an opportunity to get in the game or waiting for the coach to put you in. The time is now. The community needs are now for you to do the outreach, to do the things that you want to see within the community. And when the necessary time comes for an appointment, when the necessary time comes for an election, you'll be known in your community for getting things done. And it's so important that we stay engaged. It's so important that we use every opportunity, every platform, so that we can be able to assure a better today, a better tomorrow, and a better future. I don't like to hear people say how youth are our future. They're right now. And so it takes them being engaged right now. And a continuous engagement is what's vital to assure that they're prepared. It's very disheartening when I see my counterparts bring their children to the Capitol and engage them in the legislative process, meeting various agency executive directors, and they're able to get that type of exposure. And our Black and brown youth don't really get access like that. So I commend every panelist that's making sure that our Black and brown youth are getting the opportunity to get the access, not to just aspire to be a state representative, but to be a financial analyst or to be an executive director for one of those state agencies that are really, really vital as we're providing funding for COVID-19 funds. We have to have right leadership at the table in all aspects of government to ensure that we are having governance for the people. And so I would like to encourage every young adult, any youth that has an issue or a concern or a platform or anything that they want to see as change within their community, to get involved, get engaged, seek opportunities. Don't wait for anyone to provide the opportunity or the platform for you. When you initiate your initiative, others will follow. You're the true leaders. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think everybody on here is an example of that. This is such a great panel of exactly that type of activism. And so as we are beginning to bring the series to a close, we do have a bunch of questions that we want to get to, but it's important to remember that the 2020 census is as important this year as is the election coming this November. We heard from elected officials at all levels of government that we need to make sure that we get counted in the census and also show up on election day. I'd like to bring Ed Reed into the conversation, who is one of the executive directors at Fair Count, and talk to you a little bit about the fact that you've served on all 3 panels over the course of this series and heard all of our panelists speak. Thread the needle for us on See Me, Hear Me, Get It Done, and the census and all the help that we need to get it done.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mo. Thank you to our exciting panelists that we have. I've been inspired, particularly by this young group of leaders who serve as role models for me in the work that I continue to do at Fair Count. So thank you all for joining us. And I want to say to Delegate Price in Virginia, maybe we can have a little friendly TikTok challenge around the census. We'll see to get people engaged. But I've been working at Fair Count for just about a year now. And the work that we've been doing is really probably the most impactful work that I've ever done in my career. From working to increase awareness around the census for Black men across Georgia, but also across the nation, working to install the internet in rural communities across the state of Georgia, and also participating in virtual forums just like the one we're on this afternoon. So it's really been an impactful experience and really seeing how the census has a true impact on communities, particularly communities of color. I am a child of a Baptist minister, so I have 3 takeaways that I've learned from this series. And I don't know why we should stop at 3 episodes. The Fair Count staff may not like that, but I think we should certainly keep this conversation going because it's a needed conversation, particularly in communities of color. But the first point I'll make is, and this has been touched on particularly by Representative James, is that young people really need a sense of why the census is important for them. We need to make it relational. We need to show the direct impacts. It's not enough to say it's, roughly $1.5 trillion in resources, or it impacts economic development, or it impacts redistricting through the process of reapportionment. We need to show them what that means, and whether that means showing them how the political lines are drawn, or how a business is looking to come to community based on jobs, the availability of population in communities, or looking at how that funding is used in communities. And I thought the example that Representative James had was excellent in being able to articulate just that message. The second point I'll say is that being counted, or see me, or voting, or hear me, they don't exist in silos. They are fundamental pillars of our democracy. And in fact, young people of color have been a part of that process for years. And I feel that 2020 will be no different. We've had hurdles, we've had obstacles, and they continue to come. Every day when we turn on the news in the morning, you're just like, okay, what's it going to be this morning? But we are a resilient bunch of people. And I look at the folks that are on this call. 2 of them that have just gotten over COVID-19 are resilient in the work that they continue to do. Not only fighting for their families, but they're fighting for other families. Knowing that they have to deal with health concerns as well. And so it's really important that 2020 is our year, not only for the census, but it will be also for voting. The last thing I'll say in terms of a takeaway, we've seen a lot of excitement, a lot of inspiration from the 3 episodes that we've had with this series. And so Fair Count is going to be announcing in a couple of weeks that we're launching a new initiative called the Young Leaders Council. And we are going to, I don't think it's enough to give young people a seat at the table. but why don't we give young people their own table to have, and that they can come up with the creative and innovative ideas to be a part of the process, not only the census, but also furthering the pathways to greater civic participation and engagement. So stay tuned for that. But, I'm really excited, of all the work that the Fair Count team is doing, particularly those that are behind the scene and making this series such a success that will continue to go on for months to come. So thank you so much to all of our guests, and thank you, Mo, for moderating.
Ed, thank you so much. I know firsthand how much work you put into this and how hard Fair Count is working every day to make sure that youth are counted in this census. We have a bunch of questions, so I'd like to try to get through as many as we can. So I'm going to point this first question at the mayor, and it comes from Jasmine Baker, who is from Philadelphia. She's age 25, and she says, will the 2020 census be used to help with coronavirus relief?
That's a good question. I think for us, I've attempted to tie everything together. So I just received a message probably about 9 a.m. Central Time this morning that says, we've been doing all these food drives. We had a food drive Saturday. We turned out there were probably about 900 plus cars, right? She mentioned that the next time that we're providing some form of COVID coronavirus relief, is it possible to attach it to actually engaging people in the census? My answer was, I gave her a little emoji and said, that's a great thought. Maybe we should flush that out and see how that looks. So for me, I would like to see us connect at a community level where there's all these community events where we're trying to provide some form of relief for our residents. I know here locally, we've had something called Be Strong, and that is simply to provide relief not only for the employer who has probably had to close his or her business, but mainly for those hourly employees who've been laid off as well. Turns out a lot of those hourly employees are of younger age, and they probably haven't thought about the census, especially as it relates to having some form of anxiety or fear around how they're gonna pay their bills, et cetera. And so I think in my position as mayor, we need to be creative with opportunities we're offering to provide relief and connect to the actual census as far as engagement. So I think that can look various ways, but we don't have a tangible way today.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I'm going to point this next question to Senator Nikema Williams. It's from Daniel Hayden from Richmond, Virginia, who's also age 25. And he said, with the census deadline having changed and been extended, what impacts will the census have on elections this year, since it could be extended all the way to October 31st, just 1 week before the November election? And wants to know, will that be a positive thing?
So the good thing is, Daniel, is that we, even with delays in the census, is not a delay for our election. So that's one thing. We need to get in this mindset that we can vote by mail. We can vote so safely by mail. We need to encourage our friends to return their census by mail or online. So those are things that we can do without anyone having to come to our doors or to our homes and remain safe. The census numbers and data won't impact this year's elections, because we use that information to come up with the number of constituents that I have the pleasure of serving past the 2020 election. So we'll do redistricting in 2021, and then we'll have new district lines drawn after that. But we need to use every opportunity with the expansion of the census to get as many of our people counted as possible. As we've seen in so many different issues, especially things like what's happening down in Brunswick right now with Ahmaud Arbery, that the number of people that you represent in a district, in our district attorney lines that are drawn, all of that impacts who serves us and who leads us. And the COVID-19 pandemic has shined a spotlight on the need for true leadership in this country. So we need to use these expansions of dates to get the census done. Right now it's August, perhaps it'll be later, but every day that we have another opportunity to expand representation in this country is a positive. But don't let anyone lead that into any reason that we need to be delaying our elections, because we can vote at home by mail very safely in this country.
Thank you so much for that. Sydney Coffey, who is from Tampa, Florida, and is age 22, has a question that I'm going to point to Representative Ted James for. And she asks, what can we do as young people to encourage our family members that are afraid to complete the census because of the data mistrust?
Yeah, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you are informed, right? There are a lot of myths out there regarding the census. If I'm on parole, will that impact me? If grandma is living here and she's not, maybe I shouldn't tell people that grandma is living here. All these different things are out there. But number one, but for us to be ambassadors, we have to, number one, get really educated on what the census is about. And I would encourage young people to have those conversations with our seniors, because I hear it at the Council on Aging here in Baton Rouge. So, for our young people, just arm yourself with the information and make it a part of all these daily conversations that you're out there having. Because I'll tell you, in my family, when the younger would go and speak information to the elders, they would listen, because number one, they're excited that you are really taking the time to go out there and gather that information. And the elders are starting to listen to us a lot more. So make it a part of your everyday conversation. Like the mayor said, we have to find a way to talk about the census and relate it to everything that we're doing. My district is a direct recipient of a new district that was created here in Baton Rouge after our lines were redrawn, and talk to them about, grandma is complaining about that school board member or that senator or that state rep. And you talk to her, well, grandma, you need to, fill out the census, because next year they're going to draw those lines, and maybe we could, make sure that our folks are counting in high numbers so we could get that person out of office.
That is perfect. Thank you for that. I would like to take this to Delegate Price and ask her about college students and graduate students have had to return home early, and some have even been displaced. How can we make sure that they are counted in the census?
Yes, so I've been talking with some of the presidents and folks at some of the local schools here in Virginia, and they've taken the initiative to make sure that they remind the students. First of all, I think it's because you're supposed to fill out your census based on where you would have been on April 1st had it not been for the pandemic. And so a lot of these schools want to make sure that the areas where they're located are getting the resources that they need for when they open back up and for everything next year. But I think there are a lot that schools and localities and states can do to make sure, if they have contact information, from texting and emailing, school blasts, and social media, to remind folks that they need to be included in the census. And for those that are displaced, I would hope that there's someone that they were connected to at school that knows how to get in touch with them, not only to remind them for the census, but also to see if they can connect them to us so that we can help them get the resources that they need should they need them during this time. But we're all connected to someone. And so if you are sitting here and watching this, that means that you have the capability to go online. So that means that we need you to send 100 emails, because I used to say 5, and then I saw some of these contact lists, like y'all can send 100 emails, 100 text messages, just to make sure that no matter where your friends are across the Commonwealth, that y'all can do this peer-to-peer much easier. As we've discussed, they'll listen to you more so than some of us, but just reminding them, and put it in your own words, but reminding them that the census is super important. And so if they're being included on someone else's, to make sure that they're in the count. If they're doing their own, to make sure that they know how to complete it. But I think that this is going to have to be a system based on the infrastructure that we use for everything else. Black Twitter, I need y'all, pick it up. We can talk more about the census while we're doing these other things too, and multitask.
Thank you so much. And Representative Jackson, this is kind of a follow-up to that for you to add any other resources, but many people are following the stay-at-home orders. And how can we volunteer or engage to help census participation and voting mail efforts and vote by mail efforts?
I would definitely concur with Delegate Price and others, and not be redundant, but just using your platforms, using social media, using your contacts, your areas of influence to influence as many people as possible, and just simply taking the by any means necessary approach to get it done. And so with that being said, I think we can get it done, and we don't have to use anything as an excuse to keep our people from voting when there's systematic things that are put in place so that we can not vote, so that we won't complete the census. As you've already heard, how important it is that we have you counted and how important it is for you to vote. And as said earlier, I may not be able to influence everybody, but individuals that are of influence in various sectors, do your part and let's get it done.
Thank you so much, everybody. Well, it is that time. I can't believe an hour has passed already, but we want to thank you for tuning in for our final episode of Undercounted, Young, Black, and Fed Up. Thank you to each of our panelists, Mayor Randall Woodfin, Delegate Marcia Price, Representative Latasha Jackson, Representative Ted James, and our very own Senator Nikema Williams, as well as Fair Count Program Director Ed Reed for joining us today. Thank you to those of you at home who are tuning in via Facebook Live for our discussion. If we didn't answer your question, please check back in the comments and we will have an answer for you there. We hope you will all be watching and joining us again. Oh, no, we're not. This is the last one. Oh no, Ed, we need another one. Okay, there is no next week. But just go to at Fair Count and make sure that you find out about all the programs that we have and the information. Of course, remember, you can fill out your census at www.my2020census.gov. That's my2020census.gov if you have not done so already. So until the next time, follow us at Fair Count, and we wish you all an excellent week. And don't forget to be engaged and a part of the process. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.